Every avoidant has a secret fantasy, a version of someone so ideal that they'll break basically every rule that they normally live by. Now, these rules are designed to keep them in control. When you do fit that fantasy, their defenses crack. And today, I'm going to show you what that fantasy is, the rules it overrides, how to tell if you fit it, and what really happens after they let you in. So let's start with the fantasy. All right, I've always been a huge fan of the classics, like Frankenstein. So I figured to really have fun with this and basically make this into an avoidance fantasy, we're going to use Frankenstein. Think of this kind of like we're going to be creating body parts of the perfect person that an avoidant would just naturally be drawn to. And there are really 5 body parts that they're going to be drawn to. The first one is obviously the head. Now, the head is meant to represent the independent mind. They're going to want someone who thinks for themselves. There's no excessive need for approval. They're going to essentially be drawn to someone who can make decisions without checking in constantly, and they love it because it signals that you're not going to suffocate them with these constant emotional demands. So again, head equals independent mind. Next is the heart. Now, the heart, on the other hand, is basically emotional safety without pressure. They're always drawn to people who are warm and open, but not necessarily overbearing. They can sit in silence without panicking or filling space with reassurance seeking. And avoidants really love this because they can connect without fearing a loss of autonomy. Next up, we have the hands. Now, the hands are the equivalent to self-sufficiency. They want someone who has their own goals, has their own passions, and basically has a specific life structure and doesn't necessarily drop everything for the relationship. Now, avoidants love this because it reassures them that you won't be completely dependent on them. Number 4 is they want someone with a spine. You can see our Frankenstein monster is slowly starting to come together here. The spine is meant to represent unshakable boundaries. They are going to be naturally drawn or fantasize about someone who can calmly communicate what's okay and what's not. They want someone who can basically walk away if the respect is broken, which you wouldn't necessarily think about because a lot of times with avoidance, they're drawn to these anxious type of relationships, or they end up in these anxious type of relationships where people who are being disrespected, or specifically anxious, preoccupied people who are being disrespected, don't walk away. Well, they fantasize about not having that happen. And they love it because ironically, boundaries feel safer to them than blind devotion because it basically creates predictability. Then 5th and finally, the eyes. The eyes are basically a non-judgmental presence. They want someone who accepts their quirks, their need for space, and doesn't try to fix them, which again, talking about anxious, preoccupied individuals, those individuals constantly are trying to fix them. Now, avoidants love this because they fear being seen as flawed or broken, and feeling accepted is incredibly rare. Fun fact about the eyes, though, very rarely do they ever let anyone get close enough to accept their quirks or to even show their quirks. Okay, so we built out the perfect Frankenstein version of who an avoidant is going to be drawn to. But in order to understand how this fantasy basically becomes their obsession, we need to understand the rules that avoidants usually follow throughout their life. Rules that they very rarely let anyone in on. But I'm going to today. And there are 5 of them. Think of these as the 5 fundamental rules for avoidance. Maybe another way to think about this is these are the defense mechanisms that you'll often see me talk about here in attached. The defense mechanisms that make them an avoidant. All right, the first building block, or the first main rule, is to maintain emotional distance at all times. They want to keep their feelings locked up, and they want conversations always to stay surface level. You're rarely going to get access to what's really going on inside of them. Failing that, that's when rule number 2, the prioritize independence, comes into play. This is the one that you see almost everyone on YouTube talking about, myself included, with the core wound of being, hey, an avoidant really wants their independence. They're going to guard their time, they're going to guard their space, they're going to basically make decisions very, very fiercely and not prioritize your opinion on it. Any hint of reliance they sense from you is going to feel like a threat to their freedom. The third rule is the idea of avoiding relying on other people. You're not going to see an avoidant ask for help, even when they need it. Accepting support to them can feel like weakness, so a lot of times they're going to go it alone. Rule number 4 is this idea that they're going to exit any kind of relationship, conversation. It's kind of like one of those Russian nesting dolls that, anything this applies to, they're going to exit when they feel overwhelmed. So if they feel like closeness is building too quickly, they're going to create space. Sometimes they'll do this by pulling away. Other times they'll just end things outright or even go as far as ghosting you. And the 5th rule is they're going to really downplay the relationship's importance. They're going to act like relationships are optional or secondary. It's essentially their way of lowering expectations and avoiding deeper entanglement. But here's the funny thing. We still haven't really answered the question that you initially clicked on this video for. How does this fantasy break these rules down? So before you right now, I have placed 5 specific boxes. Now, each one of these boxes is meant to represent a rule. Rule 1, maintain emotional distance. 2, 3, so on and so forth. You get the kind of idea. Here's where this starts to come alive and just essentially starts connecting up. Now, you remember the Frankenstein perfect version that we created that avoidants are just going to be obsessed with? Well, it turns out that every single one of the qualities that we created applies to one of these rules. They unlock these rules. So, for example, with rule number 1, which is all about maintaining emotional distance, one of those 5 Frankenstein traits is going to unlock it and basically prevent that rule from overtaking them. Real quick, though. This is Sonia. She posted this in my community way back in 2022. He proposed. He surprised me on our walk by the lake. We move into our new home together in July, and the marriage is set for the fall of 2023. Oh, and according to her now husband was a fearful avoidant. She even linked to a YouTube interview where she broke down exactly how she got him to propose. Now, the big question on your mind is probably, well, what did Sonia do to get this kind of success? Well, here's the thing. Sonia didn't beg, chase, or wait around for her avoidant to change. She followed a proven framework, one that's helped hundreds of people get their avoidant partners to open up, commit, and even propose. And this framework, it's inside the Seiter Super Offer. Right now, for YouTube viewers only, I'm giving you everything you need to get results like Sonia's. My complete course library, a private community, weekly live streams. Now, normally I sell all of these things separately, but today you're going to get everything at 50% off. A one-time payment of $97. No monthly fees, no hidden costs, just everything you need to make your avoidant regret losing you and reignite their obsession. So if you're interested, click the link in the description below and start your transformation today. All right, let's get back to it. So rule number 1, maintaining the emotional distance. The thing that really unlocks rule number 1 is the heart. For reference, if you forgot, the heart is basically emotional safety without pressure. Avoidants live by the rule of keeping their emotions locked away. I mean, that's what this whole video has been about so far. It's not that they don't have deep feelings, though. It's that sharing them often feels dangerous. So in the world, opening up equals losing control, and losing control often equals getting swallowed whole. So they keep conversations surface level by sidestepping anything that could tether them too tightly. But again, that's where our heart trait slips past their defenses. The ability to be emotionally available without smothering. It's the difference between sitting with someone in quiet comfort versus constantly asking, hey, are you mad at me? Or hey, do you still like me? Or hey, are we okay? When you embody this, you create a paradox that they just can't easily resolve. Connection that doesn't demand reciprocity in the moment. You're not prying open their vault. You're just simply there, steady and safe. And that safety is critical because it lowers their perceived risk of engulfment, the fear that once they let you in, they're going to be consumed. Think of it like standing on the edge of a pool. Now, most people try to drag the avoidant straight into the deep end. The heart trait just dips a toe in, showing that the water is fine, then goes back to basking in the sun. There's no pressure to dive in before they're ready. Now, over time, that consistent low-pressure presence works on them. It feels rare, special, almost impossible to find. And once they realize they can connect without surrendering their independence, the emotional distance lock begins to click open. But not because you forced it. Just they chose to turn the key themselves. That's the beauty of this whole idea. All right, so rule number 2, the thing that unlocks that lock is the head. And for reference, the head is meant to be the independent mind. Basically, the avoidant wants someone who thinks for themselves and has no excessive need for approval. All right, so for an avoidant, independence isn't just a lifestyle, it's literally their safety net. They've built their entire internal system around protecting their time, their space, their decision making. And the moment someone tries to co-pilot their life, alarms start blaring. Even small things like, being told what to do or feeling obligated to consult a partner before making plans can trigger that "I need to get out" reflex. That's why the head trait is such a powerful override. It's the signal that you think for yourself. You're not looking to outsource your decisions or have them manage your life. You have opinions, you have preferences, and you're not afraid to stand by them. Now, here's the trick. While avoidants push away when they sense control, they lean in when they sense autonomy, especially in someone they're attracted to. Independent thinkers are inherently less threatening because they're unlikely to start eroding an avoidant's boundaries. So instead, they create this dynamic where both people stand on their own 2 feet, side by side, instead of one person trying to merge into the other. I want you to imagine 2 parallel lines running forward. No one's trying to force them to intersect before they're ready. The avoidant can match pace without feeling yanked off their own path. That sense of freedom is intoxicating to them because it gives them room to breathe while still engaging with you. Over time, you'll find that the independent mind rewires their association between closeness and control. They start realizing that being in a relationship with you doesn't mean losing themselves. It means having a partner who respects their selfhood. And once that belief takes root, the lock on their independence isn't something they feel the need to guard so fiercely. All right, so rule number 3, avoiding reliance on others. The thing that unlocks that are the hands. For reference, the hands are equivalent to self-sufficiency. Not really much to go into there. One of the deepest rules in the avoidant playbook is never to depend on anyone. To them, reliance is a slippery slope. Today, you ask for a ride to the airport. Tomorrow, you're expecting them to carry the emotional weight of your entire life. That fear of being pulled into a caretaker role runs deep, and it's often rooted in early experience where help came with strings attached or where depending on someone ended in disappointment. So they've essentially adapted by doing it all themselves, even when it's exhausting, even when they're silently wishing for support. They'd rather shoulder the burden alone than risk feeling trapped or obligated. This is where our hands trait disarms them. Self-sufficiency shows them that you have your own goals, you have your own structure, your own ways of handling challenges. You're not expecting them to rescue you or make you run your life smoothly. You've got that covered. Now here's where the magic really comes in. When someone doesn't demand help, it creates space for the avoidant to want to offer it. That's the paradox. The less you lean on them for survival, the more they feel safe enough to step forward voluntarily. Picture a scale. Now on one side is the weight of obligation. It's heavy, it's pressing, it's suffocating. And on the other side is choice, light, effortless, even enjoyable. Self-sufficiency keeps the scale tipped towards choice, so they never feel the oppressive pull of expectation. Now, over time, this shifts their perception. They see that being close to you won't automatically sign them up for an unpaid full-time role as your emotional provider. And once they believe that, the lock on avoid reliance starts to loosen. All right, so rule number 4, exit when feeling overwhelmed. The thing that unlocks this is the spine. And once again, if you're forgetting what the spine is, it's all about you having unshakable boundaries. Moments of closeness for avoidance start to feel like quicksand. Their instinct is to bolt. It's not always about them disliking the other person. It's just kind of more about the internal flood alarms telling them, hey, this is too much. This is happening way too fast. And when emotional intensity spikes, they fear losing their balance. So they create, you guessed it, space. Sometimes subtly, sometimes by ending things entirely. To them, this retreat is the only way to regain a sense of control. They see it as a reset button. Without it, they worry they'll be pulled deeper into a dynamic they're not ready for, and they don't trust anyone else to know where their limit is. That's where the spine concept of boundaries come into play. Strong boundaries mean you not only respect your own limits, but you also intuitively respect theirs. You don't chase when they step back. You don't collapse into panic or protest. Instead, you give space calmly without resentment, and you have the backbone to enforce your own needs. This creates a predictable rhythm for avoidance. To the avoidant, predictability equals safety. It tells them they won't have to keep slamming the brakes to protect themselves because you already know how to regulate the pace. Think of it like dancing. Most people try to force the avoidant into this constant close hold, which only makes them want to step off the floor. Strong boundaries let the dance breathe. A close step here, a little space there, until both people find a sustainable tempo. Over time, this steadiness rewires their association between overwhelm and retreat. They learn that closeness with you isn't a runaway train, it's a controlled ride with exits clearly marked. And with that reassurance, they stop feeling the need to pull the emergency brake so often. And that leads us very nicely into our fifth rule. The idea that downplaying relationship importance is important. And the thing that unlocks that are the eyes. For reference, the eyes are you basically just having a non-judgmental presence. Avoidants often act like the relationship is optional. It's a nice to have rather than the center of their world. On the surface, it can look cold or dismissive, but underneath, it's a shield. If they convince themselves it's not that important, then losing it won't hurt that much. It's emotional insurance against vulnerability. This low-stakes framing also protects them from the fear of being fully seen, because deep down, many avoidants carry this hidden belief. If someone really knew me, if they knew all my flaws and my quirks and my past mistakes, they'd leave. So they keep the relationship at an arm's length. They never let it grow into something that could expose those raw spots. The eyes basically bypasses this defense by meeting them exactly where they are. Quirks, flaws, contradictions, and all, without trying to fix them. You don't roll your eyes at their need for space. You don't launch into lectures about how they should open up faster. You accept them as they are in the moment. That kind of non-judgmental presence is rare in their world. It eases the shame that they've been bracing for and replaces it with something unfamiliar. Relief. The more relief they feel, the less they need to keep the relationship in that optional category to protect themselves. It's like giving someone permission to exhale after holding their breath for years. With you, they can relax without fearing a trapdoor of criticism constantly beneath it. Okay, so here's my big question. What happens after the avoidant breaks their rules? We've got the graphic pulled up here. Let's say we have someone that has unlocked every one of the boxes. They have someone who has the heart, that has the head, that has the hands, the spine, and the eyes. What does that look like? Well, believe it or not, that's when this brutal cycle begins. Now, I know it probably doesn't make a lot of sense right now just looking at it, but bear with me here. All right, so we're going to take it from the top because this is much like my avoidant death wheel. The very first thing is they're going to have some sort of honeymoon inside the walls. At first things will deepen. You're inside their defenses. They're more open. They're more connected and available. For them and for you, it's going to feel like a real turning point. And I think the thing that people don't talk about a lot with this is it can actually really take and last a long time. It's in the avoidant's best interest to draw the honeymoon period out as long as humanly possible. After all, they don't like any kind of conflict. It's right there in the name, avoidant. But this kind of leads me to ask an interesting question. Are they aware they're about to blow things up? Because, we all know that's what's coming next. Now, I can only speak personally, but every single time that I've ended a relationship, I was aware and I was thinking about it weeks beforehand. I was just too afraid to act. It's kind of like working your courage up to it. And that leads us to the next aspect of our cycle. Something will always set them off inevitably. Their avoidant instincts will resurface, closeness will destabilize them, their core wiring seeks to regain balance. The first thing that kind of comes to my mind here is the attachment battle that happens inside. When you enter into a relationship with an avoidant, you can be secure. You can be avoidant yourself. But what's going to happen is your attachment style and their attachment style is going to go to war. and someone is going to win. If you're secure and they're avoidant, either they're going to become a little bit more secure by being around you, or you're going to become a little bit more anxious or avoidant based on your own coping mechanisms by being around them. And that leads us to one of the most bizarre admissions you'll ever hear me make about avoidance: the fantasy paradox. Once they have their fantasy, there's nothing more to look forward to. The fantasy has always been safe because it's always unreachable. Now it's real, and it feels threatening instead of exciting. But I would even argue that maybe it's a tad disappointing for an avoidant to find their fantasy. You know, you have the person that has all the right traits and unlocks all the stuff that Attach talks about with deactivating strategies. Sometimes the reality of you, or sometimes the fantasy of you building that up in your mind, is a lot more exciting than the reality of it. Our fantasies are always more enticing than reality. And that kind of leads us to the end of the cycle. They end up just restoring the old system. They put the horizon back where it was. They reinstate emotional distance. And around we go. You know, they'll let someone in their walls, then they'll break the walls down, and then they'll realize, hey, the fantasy wasn't all it was marked up to be. Then they'll go back to start and they just live their whole life this way. And it's kind of inescapable. And if you're sitting here and you're wondering, what is the point to any of this? You know, you do all this work. You have all of these qualities. You're the perfect person for them, and they still reject you. You've done nothing wrong. I did this video a few weeks ago, and at the end of it, I posed a pretty difficult question. Do you want to, or have the ability to, or have the endurance to consistently go through that cycle? That cycle is there. It's not going anywhere. I think a lot of people who watch my videos desperately want their avoidance back, but they're falling victim to the same fantasy the avoidant is. They want this perfect relationship when the reality is that avoidants aren't really capable of having that kind of relationship yet. And in order for an avoidant to even get to that point, it's going to take a lot of self-work by them, discipline by you so that you don't become anxious, and time. And that's the part no one really wants to face. Even if you do become their fantasy, it's not the permanent ticket to happily ever after. And that's because fantasies aren't really meant to be lived in forever. They're meant to be chased and admired from a distance, and once caught, picked apart until the shine wears off. It's kind of like when you hear a new song for the first time and you're in love with the song and you can't stop listening to the song, and you listen to the song over and over and over, and then 3 months later you can't stand hearing the song because you've listened to it so many times. So I think the real question isn't, can you win them back? It's, can you keep choosing them after you've seen this cycle play out again and again? Because if you can't, maybe the fantasy you're chasing isn't really them at all. Maybe it's a version of yourself that doesn't have to keep running in circles just to feel loved.